And next up, we're going to be watching, and I can't believe this is the real title, Overly Sarcastic Productions Pope Fights, the Pornocracy. Yes, it's really called that. I have questions, and I know that the history of the Papal States had some very colorful events, like how there are actually tunnels leading to brothels from the Vatican, or what were at the time tunnels to brothels. Now, whether that's true or I just heard someone bullshitting me and I have no idea whatsoever if that is the case or not, I don't know. But I would not be surprised. So this might be what it's about. It might not. I don't know, but it's going to be a thing. That's what I'm here for. So let's jump into it.
Yourself in a situation that makes you think, who on earth is in charge here? Sometimes it seems like either nobody
I've been in that situation so many times. I know that feeling. I know that feeling well.
is steering the ship, or whoever is at the helm can't tell the difference between a cloud and an iceberg. In our
Hey, where's my boat? You sank it, Your Holiness. Yeah.
daily lives and across history, the feeling is all too common because states and governments of all sizes are human constructions, complications and all. Whatever lofty ideals they might aspire to, decisions ultimately get made by humans who could be at their best or their worst, or even in direct competition with each other. This applies to republics, monarchies, and off-the-wall nonsense like an elected theocracy.
Oh yeah, they were
the
technically
Pope,
elected.
holy ruler of the Catholic Church and the head honcho of Christianity for most of its 2,000-year history. When it comes to, say, medieval European religion, it should be
Holy
pretty
Roman.
obvious. He's in charge. But
Except for the times he wasn't, and the times there was more than one pope, or the times they didn't acknowledge the pope, or the religions that are technically Christian but don't have popes, and the times that the pope didn't exist. There's been weird things.
viewers, it is never that simple when we are dealing with pope fights. And so we embark upon a
Literally
story of
fighting
scandals,
usually.
slanders, secular squabbles, suspicious lines of succession, and apparently a lot of sex. See, the span of years from 896 to 964 is known to history as the Pornocracy.
I'm sorry. That's not a joke. I thought it was not just a... When he said it's called the Pornocracy, I thought he was talking about like a colloquial term for a time period, not the actually recognized term for it. What years were these? Because I thought that was a lot later than I thought.
See, the span of years from 896 to 964 is known
Oh, 896, not 1896. I thought it was a lot more recent than I was expecting.
to history as the Pornocracy. Yes, it is actually called that. The name comes from the Greek meaning rule of prostitutes, which is a title so sensational that we can get a whiff of an agenda here.
Also, rule of mistresses, rule of harlots. You know what? Somehow calling it the Pornocracy actually makes it sound more dignified than what they actually intended. The rule of prostitutes is not what I was expecting, but goddamn. Either metaphorical or physical, and either one is probably accurate.
Mayhaps a little grudge wafting out from our sources. Keep that skepticism in mind as we dive into the salacious story of the Pornocracy to see if it was really so awful, learn what was actually going on in the wider history of the papacy, and figure out who on earth is in charge here. Now let's do some history. Our tale kicks off in 896 with the appointment of Stephen VI as Pope, whose first order of business was litigating the actions of his predecessor Pope Formosus by ripping him out of the ground and putting his corpse on trial.
Oh, yep, they have called that one before because they were basically trying to bullshit.
Details of the case and whatever Stephen was hoping to accomplish
Did
didn't
it
matter
work?
for long because the Roman people were so affronted by the morbid
You can ask him yourself in a minute.
spectacle, they deposed, imprisoned, and strangled him. And in the decade after, Rome saw 2 more popes get deposed.
Other popes briefly include Pope Romanus, deposed. Theodore II, died. John IX, died. Benedict IV, died. Pope Leo V, deposed. 97, 97, 98, 2 years on this guy, 3 years on the next one, and the next guy was literally a single year.
So at the turn of the century, if the popes clearly weren't in charge, then who was? That would be the family of Theophilacti I, count of a nearby hill town called Tusculum. Him and his wife Theodora
Really?
were well-to-do and well-connected, arranging for the appointment of Sergius III as pope in 904. But hold on, aren't popes supposed to be elected? Yes, but at this stage in the game, the pope was chosen by a nebulous agreement between Rome's citizens and aristocrats, which is conveniently very gameable.
Really, the citizens were involved. The aristocrats make sense because people with money like other people with money to give them more money when they need money. The citizens is actually the surprising part there. I'm assuming it was more for show, though.
exchange, Sergius made Theophylact Vestararius and Magister Militum, putting him in charge of papal finances and the armies and effectively making him the ruler of Rome. And that
The finances and the armies. And he basically said, suddenly I feel significantly less in control. Oh, yeah.
kind of power outlasts any one pope and any one count, because Theophylact appointed 2 more popes before his death in 924, and his family continued to hold the reins of Rome and its popes for most of the next century.
I couldn't resist the source. Wait, I couldn't source the coat of arms for the Theophilacti family. So here's the generic eagle crest of their offshoot Conti family. Wait, that's a generic one? I thought that was specifically Holy Roman, which probably played into it. My choice of maroon was purely on vibes. Yes, I know this doesn't affect the narrative, but it matters to me.
Okay, so definitely a departure from the saintly aura the papacy would normally aim for. Can't really feel
Hey,
like
old man
Sergius
reacts.
is
Up, man.
the will of God when he's quite abundantly the will of that power-hungry aristocrat over there. But realpolitik is
It's the voice of God who is paying my bills currently. Oh, wait, different person.
hardly a scandal in the world of 900s Italy. Certainly no more shocking than corpse court a decade earlier. So what's the problem? Well, Theophylact was one of 3 power brokers in his family, as there was his wife Theodora and their daughter Marozia, both of whom earned the title of senatrix in their careers. These 2
Senatrix?
people were powerful women, dramatic gasp, and they allegedly had sex with people. Oh no, the papacy is in ruins. What will St. Peter do when he finds out what sex is because of this?
Probably laugh and put them behind the rest of the popes who did other things that were horrible. Also, in chat, just gonna pull up, this is funny. Old man react, jumped in, he went, thunder, thunder, thunder bugs! Nice.
Well, if he didn't know before, St. Pete was sure gonna find out now, because Pope Sergius broke his priestly vow of chastity with a still teenaged Marozia, allegedly fathering the future Pope John the 11th. Keep track of all these allegedlys, we'll crack that open in a minute.
God damn! I mean, are we talking like 18, 19? No, actually, considering how old this is, it's probably more like 12. Yeah, that's fucked up enough to be a believable one. Senatrix was a female senator? Oh.
The papal philandering continued, intensified even, during the papacy of John X, who mingled with one matriarch after the other. He was appointed
Okay, but if lust is bad, then why did God make it so fun? At what time was the Divine Comedy written? Actually, I'm just going to look it up because I wonder if that might be related to this. Dante's Divine Comedy. Ah, yeah, good old Wikipedia. Nope, that was in the 1300s. This is 300 years before this even came up. Ah.
appointed in 914, supposedly slammed down with Theodora until her death in 916, and then in the years after, he gave Marozia the title of senatrix as part of their own sinful love affair.
So, wait.
Sergius broke his priestly vow of chastity with a still teenaged Marozia, allegedly fathering the future Pope John the 11th. Keep track of all these allegedlys, we'll crack that open in a minute. The papal philandering continued, intensified even, during the papacy of John X, who
Okay, John the 10th, not John the 11th. I thought for a second that he was with his own daughter and that, or his own mother, and then it was with a grandmother before that. So, yeah. Somebody's getting screwed over.
mingled with one matriarch after the other. He was appointed in 914, supposedly slammed down with Theodora until her death in 916, and then in the years after, he gave Marozia the title of senatrix as part of their own sinful love affair. But alas, it wasn't until
Could you can it with the your mom jokes? Oh.
and after their falling out, Marozia married Guy of Tuscany, with whom she attacked Rome, arrested the Pope in the city, and had him jailed and killed, appointing the next 2 popes and then installing her own son as John the 11th. But not all
who might have been with the Pope before that one. Apparently he wasn't very good at his job. Because he got someone else to get married to a different man and then attack and murder you. Ooh.
All of Marozia's sons were so pliable, as another son by her first marriage, Alberic, objected to her 3rd marriage to King Hugh of Italy with his northern sensibilities and sus foreign armies. So in 923, during the wedding ceremony, Alberic threw a coup, imprisoning Marozia for 5 years until she died in jail. Bad news for Marozia, but Alberic swiped her role as Rome's #1 power broker.
In my defense, Hugh was a subpar conversationalist. We're all better off without him.
and ruled the city for the next 22 years, handpicking the next 4 popes between his brother John XI and his son John XII. All in all, the Theophilacti dynasty ruled Rome and puppeteered its pope across 60 straight years, 4 generations, and 2 infamous matriarchs. Now, obviously, the holy office of pope being swayed from its sacred purpose, taking orders from aristocrats and canoodling outside of celibacy vows.
Honestly, if you told me this was royals and just didn't include the celibacy vows in there, this basically sounds like most of European dynasties. Funny how the thing that people figured was how you ran a kingdom was how people in charge of powerful kingdoms ran them. I'm sure it's a coincidence.
Is bad on principle, but like, come on. We've seen way worse than this. Even taking every scandalous fact, can we say this 60-year span is really the lowest the papacy has ever?
Has it ever been worse than 1904 to 1964? Yes. Yeah, the previous video showed that.
Stooped. Forget the Reformation, the political squabbles with kings and emperors, the corruption and wars of the Renaissance, or a century of anti-popes. No, it's the time a lady was in charge that Rome was at its most godless. And who is saying anyway? Who benefits from this being the worst thing to ever happen to Catholicism? Well,
probably the people who came right after it.
That's an interesting question, because our most vivid accounts come from one Liutprand of Cremona, writing a few decades after this all
Wow, they really make him look like a curmudgeon. They did a great job at that.
Went down. Liutprand got his start working for King Hugh of Italy and New Marozia insofar as she married his boss and almost got him killed at their wedding. His career path later took him to Constantinople on diplomacy and landed him in the court of the Holy Roman Emperor Otto I, in whose...
Ah, yeah, that makes a lot more sense considering the Holy Roman Emperor. That, let's go with mostly failed setup.
Employ he had to contend with Marozia's grandson, Pope John XII. From Liutprand's perspective, the Theophilacti family was a thorn in his side for his entire life, and that loathing figures mightily in his 6-decade history.
The entire city of Rome was a mistake?
Just so happens to be where the overwhelming majority of the anti-Theophilacti slander derives from, with such stories as Marozia fathering one pope by another pope, or how John XII died from a paralyzing sickness that struck him during an act of adultery. Sure, buddy. Sure.
I mean, to be completely fair, though, that actually has been noted to happen multiple times in salacious news stories, so that's not even that odd. Mostly because if you're an elderly man and blood pressure is an issue, sexual activity is actually a huge strain on your heart. So if you have issues, it's most likely to be the thing that kills you because it's a sudden event that gets your blood pumping, but also because of how it works, there's less blood pumping because it's concentrated. And yeah, it's actually not uncommon for that to be a way people die because sudden, less blood doing more work harder than your heart can deal with doesn't live long. Take that however you wish.
Liutprand is the most detailed and by far the sauciest account from the period, but he is not the only one, as chronicler Eugenius Vulgarius claims that Theodora was full of virtue. Contrasting evidence. And other sources critical of popes from the era don't even approach Liutprand's wild claims. What
Believe it or not, you should not.
likely really happened is our trusty pal Ludipatuti over here had a blinding bias favoring his employers King Hugh and Emperor Otto and spiced up his personal grudges by fabricating low-grade smut. This is...
I mean, yeah. But can you imagine all the times we have history that's really just someone talking about their bias and occasionally mentioning things that were accidentally true? I mean, it's like we literally named history based on Historianus, or Historicus, not Historicus. Histrionis? I cannot remember the old Greek's name, who basically made up shit about places he had occasionally been. Yeah, the father of history bullshitted his way through it. So it's about as fair as most autobiographies, actually.
The worst kind of history writing. It's just trash. So if the pornocracy as described wasn't even that bad and likely wasn't even true, why on earth did any of this stick? Well, Liutprand had...
because salacious events are the stuff people actually pay attention to?
His biases, and later Protestant scholars in Germany did too, citing this era to highlight the evil, awful terribleness of the Pope, coining pornocracy and other religions.
We were also workshopping several other disparaging labels as slutricary and in test well in focus. I don't know, that seems to make it more appealing.
Words to describe this church-shattering harlotry. Their logic being that it wasn't just one particularly corrupt year in 1517 when Martin Luther decided enough was enough. No, the church in Rome was always illegitimate, and even worse, those two women were having sex about it. Gross. Meanwhile, the Catholic Church wasn't exactly itching to dredge up one of its messiest chapters to defend itself. It's way easier to just hit them with a "God works in mysterious ways," brand the era as an unfortunate
Redacted due to non-specific behaviors unbecoming of Christ. We will not elaborate.
spat of sinfulness and swiftly change the
much better.
topic. The result being the pornocracy narrative went functionally uncontested. So viewers, I tell
Because a good part of what the church does is we're not going to talk about it. And no one here reads enough to know that's the case. They're not wrong, but maybe it doesn't work out if the guys around them do talk more.
you this story not to paint Marozia's alleged boning bonanza as girl boss behavior all along, or besmirch the honor of the Catholic Church as if Pope fights is the straw that'll break that camel's back, but to
Yeah.
put all this historical vilification into actual
Also, for the 5 people out there who don't realize what he's talking about by besmirching the honor of the Catholic Church, I, as a Catholic, will point out it involves something that may or may not be completely legitimate, because it was actually where priests were arrested and sent to jail because they were doing kids. And the church knew, so they would commonly just move them to different parishes. So if you ever were Catholic and suddenly you got a new priest out of nowhere and you don't know why they're here and no one talked about it, yeah, that's why.
context. It's easy to see this period as either a scandal to be leveraged or a mess that's easier to ignore, but if we zoom out and look at Rome and the Pope in relation to the wider Christian world, we can see the pornocracy as one step in a process, namely figuring out who on earth is in charge here. Start in the mid-700s. The Papal States have just become independent after centuries as a province of the Byzantine Empire, and with potential rivals to the north and south, that's a precarious spot, so they turned to the Frankish kingdom for protection and offered in return the one thing they had to give: cultural prestige, crowning the Frankish king Charlemagne as Emperor of the Romans. For the next half-century, this arrangement works. The Emperor insulates Rome from conflict and gets to call himself Emperor, and the Pope can focus on Pope stuff. Who's in charge? A bit of both of them. But then, in 843, the empire splits up and Carolingian power rapidly withers in the decades after. So Rome has to start looking out for itself, and the papacy is too fickle an office to fit that bill. At the turn of the 900s, the logical answer to this vacuum is that aristocrats do what they do best: grab for power. So in comes the Theophilacti family, matriarchs and all, to steer the
Yeah, and that's actually the thing that I know for a fact does continue into much, much more history. I was going to say recent times, but I don't want to say anything that may or may not get anyone upset about things that has people with thin skin. So I'm not going to bring that up. But yeah, this is a tradition we're probably going to see more of if he gets to any other time period that he has already covered. Or if he has and I just missed it for some reason.
ship for 60 years. They're in charge. But how did they eventually lose power? Well, the papacy of John XII was tricky. There was trouble to the south from Capua and trouble to the north from the King of Italy. So for protection, he looked beyond the Alps to King Otto.
Wait, the King of Italy? Huh. Sorry, I know Italy was a newer construction. I didn't know that there was actually a Kingdom of Italy prior to its incorporation of all the various claims. Roughly maybe what? Around World War I or II? Huh. Or was it 1800s where Italy actually became Italy? I don't know.
Of Germany, crowning him Holy Roman Emperor in exchange for protection. But then John got anxious about such a powerful emperor so close to home, so he tried to form a league against the guy he
I regret every decision I've ever made. Ooh.
just crowned, but was found out, deposed, and replaced by a pope more favorable to the emperor. Who's in charge now? Well, Otto and Sons strengthened the church overall by bringing the clergy into the imperial administration, but the emperor still picked all the popes, so point for the HRE. As for Roman politics, the aristocratic Crescentii family rose to power in the latter 900s when the emperor installed one of them as pope. By the turn of the 1000s, the Crescentii grew strong enough to pull the strings of the papacy.
Also, am I the only one looking at this shield right now of 3 moons and thinking, oh, it's a smiley face? I know, it's dumb. It's all I can see.
But they in turn got violently overthrown by our pals the Theophilacti. With a
They came back.
They seized Rome in 1012 and took the papacy for themselves, getting back in charge with a direct family dynasty of popes. Now, on paper, not great, but over the next 30 years, this arrangement actually made the pope stronger and more independent politically, as that power directly benefited the family. However,
note on the names. The Theophilacti and the Thousands are referred to via their noble title of Tuscany or Tusculan popes. Oh.
This fell apart during the reign of their third boy, none other than the flip-flopping 3-time Pope Benedict IX from the original Pope fights.
Oh, so they were the family leading up all the way until this idiot. Huh.
Dang. Throwback. He was ultimately deposed with help from the emperor, and soon after, Pope Nicholas II changed the rules so the pope would be elected by a vote of cardinals. This, of course, is not the end of the story, as the thorny matter of who's in charge of Christendom would spill out over the next 3 centuries of geopolitical slap fights, investiture controversy, and Guelph Ghibelline wars, to name just 2. But for the question of who is in charge of Rome and who is in charge of the pope, this is when we get our answer. The pope is in charge of his office and his state. The papal states combine political, economic, military, religious, and diplomatic power in one.
The Lord works in mysterious ways. And one of those ways is apparently the Theophilacti family. Still, it could have been a lot worse. Could have been the anti-popes. Oh, God. I'm still waiting for the Medicis to come up. Again, mostly just because they're the ones I actually have some knowledge about, and I'm kind of curious to see how they'll be reflected.
Man without any prior model for what an office that powerful should look like. That's what this era is really about. The so-called pornocracy is a scandal hatched by the most dishonest, axe-grindiest chronicler in medieval history, but the evolution of power in the papal states is a subject worth investigating. And what we see is a complex, open-air trial and error as different factions compete to define the papacy and the church overall, leading to the pope and his state being far more secure by the end of the 1000s than ever before. At the cost of St. Peter learning what sex is, I think we can all grow up and deal with it. That's just another day in Pope fights.
Oh my God. Oddly enough, considering the title, I was expecting this to be one of the more salacious ones. And it wasn't actually that odd. It was more just, yeah, powerful people made powerful choices and they happened to be women, so that became the big thing that their enemies didn't like. And their enemies didn't like it because, well, I mean, admittedly, the you almost got me killed and then I work for everyone else who doesn't like you is a leading factor. And completely lying about everyone you don't like is also a very common thing. I'm not going to say in history. I'm meaning in just general. It's just common. Yeah. Also, one thing I need to change quickly. The camera was wonky. There we go. Yeah. I find this fascinating, man, because of all the stuff Blue puts in, of course, but also because there's just so much about this that I didn't really know about in history. I know broad strokes. Wow. No, broad strokes. But this is the singular stuff that I just know kind of about, in the sense that, yeah, there were popes. They were mostly appointed by families. They were kind of at odds with the Holy Romans because some bullshit. But I didn't know the details of it. And this is, again, still a very big overview, but it's a lot more minuscule information than I had any idea of before. So this is cool. It is kind of neat that it's mostly just, yeah, we're slandering them because we don't like them, as opposed to, yeah, no, they did this. And the thing is, there are still tunnels you could tour where they did go to brothels. It's just not these guys who are the ones doing it because they didn't need to get out of the town. They apparently were doing the Pope. Except they weren't, because that might have just been slander. I can't wait till he gets to the really salacious stuff. And then we'll need to find out where the Swiss Guard hide Blue's body. Hopefully that's a joke. Either way, you guys know the detail. There'll be a link below to the original video. Hit it up. I'll see you in the next one. Adios.